This is going to just focus in on lighting with the URP. Take the information from here and apply it to adding lights to your scenes. Creating a new blank scene, File, New Scene. The template I'm going to use is a basic template, just a camera and light. Clicking on Create. Let me save the scene, File, Save As. Calling it Scene Light. First, I'm creating a folder to import everything into. Call it the robot folder. Dragging in a robot, selecting the asset. In the inspector, clicking on Extract Textures. I'm going to create a small scene out here by going under Game Object, 3D Objects, Plane, dragging this robot to the plane. Oh, the robot's so small. Let me scale that robot up. And it's partly in the plane. Let me lift it up as well and reposition. This object has a shadow on it, and that shadow is coming from the directional light. I'm going to place another object in the scene. Game Object, 3D Objects, Sphere. And I'll just use this to demonstrate lights. Control D or Command D to duplicate an object. By rotating the directional light, get a shadow. Position of the directional light doesn't matter in the scene, it's just how it's rotated. Okay. I'm going to turn off the directional light. The universal render pipeline deals with point lights in casting shadows slightly different than the high definition render pipeline. First thing I'm going to do is turn off auto generate lights. You could click this icon, and if you don't see that icon, you could go under Window, Rendering, Lighting, drag this tab next to your inspector. And here's Generate Lights. So to turn it off or on, you could click this icon to end up here if the lighting tab isn't docked already. Let me create a point light, Game Object, Light, Point. Point lights are awesome, real-time visualization of light. However, you can see it's not casting a shadow onto our other objects. To manipulate a point light, you can drag its range by clicking on one of these dots of the gizmo and just dragging it bigger and smaller. Going under the inspector, with the light selected, going under the inspector, you can increase and decrease the intensity of the light, but that still doesn't help getting this light to cast a shadow. Point lights need to be baked, not real time, in order to cast a shadow. But just selecting baked isn't enough. Still have two other steps. Select the objects you want to have a shadow. I'm selecting the robot and just this sphere, leaving this one out, and click on Static. That's the first step. The next step is going under Lighting and generating the light map. Bake reflection probes. And clicking on Generate Lighting. Select this sphere, going to its inspector, clicking on Static, going back to the Lighting tab, clicking on Generate Lighting. I might need to either move or increase the intensity of this sphere. See a little dark spot right here where the baking was going on. Let me increase the intensity of the point light. Let's make it 10. Going back to lighting, generate light. The light map has been baked, and these objects now cast a shadow. If I move this object, its shadow doesn't go with it because this isn't a real-time shadow. Contrast that with the directional light that I turned off. Let me turn it back on. When I move this object, the shadow follows with it. I'm going to remove the point light. I'm going to turn off directional lights. This still has the old baking data on it. Let me go to Lighting tab, and I'll clear that. Clear baking data. And this is our scene. Luckily, spotlights do cast a shadow in the URP. To create a spotlight, go to Game Object, Light, Spotlight. The easiest way to aim a spotlight is to rotate your view with the spotlight selected, go to Game Object, Align with View. You have to increase the intensity, setting to 100, and there's a spotlight casting a shadow in real time. If I move this object, it shows the shadow isn't baked into the scene. It's being generated in real time by this spotlight. Click on the spotlight, just the inner number. You can drag this smaller and then drag outward again. This is the main focus of the spotlight, and this is the fall off, feathering out. And that's the same as adjusting this number and this number separately. Color the spotlight. For shadow type, right now it's a soft shadow. Switch it to hard shadow. And now the shadow is a lot more bitmapped. Let's go back to soft. If you're looking to get better shadows, a little less stepped from the universal render pipeline, one solution would be to bake, but if you want real-time lighting with the spotlight, so this way you can move this object and there's a shadow following, go to your assets folder, go to settings, and click on this setting, which is the high quality asset setting. And I'm in the game view to preview things. Go to lighting, and underneath additional lights, and the spotlight's an additional light, select a higher resolution. This is one way you could adjust your real-time shadows. Now, if you have a mixture of big shadows and other lights going on in the scene, you probably get away with 1024, especially if the scale of the scene is a lot bigger than this. And what I mean by that, let me scale up this sphere and move it over. As the scale of the scene becomes bigger, you're not going to notice the stepping of the shadow. We only notice the stepping of the shadow because the scale of our scene was smaller. You're not going to notice as much the jaggies and stepping when your camera is pulled back from the scene a little bit, or the scale of these objects are a lot bigger. So think about that when you're using real-time shadows, which comes from the spotlight, how to optimize the scale of the scene to work with the real-time shadows if that's what you need.